This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Straczynski. On today's show, we've got a ton to get into. I'm going to say this is more of a philosophical episode of the DocNJock Podcast. There will be some reaction, but I think we're going to look at some of the things that are going on in WWE's landscape as well as AEW's landscape and try to project and kind of pick what might be happening, because there's a lot of loose ends, a lot of things that I think we can jump into and try to forecast the future on. But, of course, we're going to have some news and notes. We're going to take a look at what's going on with WWE's pay-per-view schedule. We're going to take a look at some fallout from AEW's Brawl Out at All Out. We've got the first little pieces of items kind of falling into place in what the direction of the company might be after that massive scrum that they had, as well as this WWE Hall of Famer wants one more match. I'm going to tell you about all of that later on in the show. But, of course, we're going to take a look at what's going on with WWE, AEW, possibly Impact. We'll take a look and see. Doing it with me, as always, he's the one, he's the only, he is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Cuz, what an interesting week of wrestling. For those that don't know, I am a psychologist. I do have a license. But this week, it felt like I couldn't escape from the world of psychology. Felt like MJF needs therapy. William Regal needs therapy. Bray Wyatt dropped a little bit of a psychological profile. All this psychology, obviously, this week drew my attention. It was a crazy-ass week. Lots of rumors. Your news is now dropping near like 4,000 words every week. So I'm starting to do a word count on how much news you're trying to put out there. What an amazing week of wrestling, highlighted by Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite. A lot of shit to talk about this week, man. I'm excited.
Look, the news starts generally Monday morning. After my first flight in the morning, I'll usually sit down in my office and I'll crack the laptop and then I will start scouring for stuff. And I usually spend a good hour every single day just trying to find tidbits, different things, and add them to the news and notes segment. And it just kind of grows and grows and grows. And only if I think it's interesting and only if I think it's worth stuff for everybody. That's about the only time it ever makes the news and notes list. So, but yes, it has been getting bigger. And look, I'm sorry about it, but there's just a lot going on every single week. And look, WWE this week was no different. I think what we got happening with WWE this week was quite interesting, actually. And I don't know if you noticed it, but I kind of wanted to get your take, and I wanted to discuss this because, to me, what it felt like this week on Raw, it really felt like WWE was really trying to emphasize and make the United States Championship feel more important, feel more like a prized possession. Conversely, SmackDown, they were doing something similar with the Intercontinental Championship. So I think what you have is you have a little bit of a shift here with WWE, and I think they're trying to make those secondary championships feel a little bit more elevated. And I think the reason for this is obviously Roman Reigns working on an adjusted schedule. He's not there all the time. When you don't have your champion who has both your belts, it becomes a little bit harder to sell that show. Pushing these secondary championships, getting it on a guy like Seth Rollins. I thought Seth Rollins did great work. Did absolutely great work this week in his segments, getting over the U.S. Championship, getting over his matches, and building to a feud that I'm really interested in. And I wanted to get your take. Do you think this will work? Do you think WWE's concentrated effort and their assessment to help get over these secondary championships, which for the most part, let's be honest, WWE has kind of shit on the United States Championship and the Intercontinental Championship. I can say the Intercontinental Championship has really only felt important when The Miz had it. After that, it's just kind of been a prop. Can this effort to make these belts feel on par with the WWE Championship and the Universal Championship? Can this work, and will it work?
Yeah, it started from day one. I think right away, obviously when Triple H came into power and in control, you started seeing vignettes discussing the history of the U.S. title and the history of how these titles have kind of played a part. And you obviously start to see that potentially that WWE made them feel like more of a prop back in the day, but now they're important. And that's what it's about. It's about who holds the title, telling important storylines, and doing important things that are going to make it so that WWE has legitimate titles and they mean something. And I think that's where Triple H and his love of wrestling and his love of history understands what's going on in regards to everything with WWE. So I'm very happy. I'm very excited to see that WWE is taking a concerted effort to make these titles important, because you got to remember, if you're going to have these titles, it indicates importance. It indicates that these individuals are going to now be of prominence. But if you just have 15 titles and they change hands every week and they don't mean anything, then they're just there and they become a prop. So kudos to Triple H for making it important, because those title holders also, that's how you got to remember that when you elevate a star, you also elevate business, meaning that if you put the U.S. title on, let's say the likes of a Baron Corbin right now, and a lot of people aren't going to be really happy to go see it. But you put the U.S. title on a Seth Rollins, shit, people are going to go out there and buy a ticket, because potentially Seth Rollins is going to face Riddle in all these house shows on Christmas. You want to see that, even though we've seen it 20 times already. But those matches mean something, and that's why when you elevate the titles, you're basically elevating the business and putting more money in potentially the coffers of WWE.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to something that you and I have talked about multiple times. And more specifically, we've talked about it with the Intercontinental Championship, where it's supposed to be that stepping stone. You're supposed to be the guy who is next in line to get the WWE, or in this case, the Universal Championship. You're supposed to be that guy. And it's supposed to be a championship that's supposed to help build and get stars over. It really hasn't felt like that for a long time. I think if they can do that and they can make them feel important again, I think it does a couple of things that are really, really good. One, your weekly television is going to be that much better. You're going to have that champion that everybody is drawn to, that everybody wants to see. You're going to help put butts in seats, which helps, obviously, profits for WWE. But I also think it makes your storylines a little bit more interesting. It gives you something to tune into. We talk about when Roman Reigns comes to a television show, we're glued. We both know that his entrance takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. And I think next time he comes out, it'll probably be closer to 20, because it just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. But for those 10, 15, 20 minutes, we're glued to our television. We're watching it. They'll then cut to a commercial. We'll get up, we'll go take a pee, and we're right back in our seat for the next segment, which is going to take another 10 to 20 minutes. And we're watching because he's a draw. He's the champion. You got to see what he's going to say. You got to see what he's going to do. I think if you could elevate both of these belts on both of these shows, I think it helps get the overall product over, and I think it's better. And on top of that, it helps you get other stars, other mid-card guys, and help elevate them. And I think a guy who really got elevated this week compared to what took place about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, is Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali, we both know, is an incredible talent. Guy is absolutely fantastic. He has had some of the absolute worst gimmicks that you've ever seen in wrestling, whether it be Retribution or him just kind of out there floundering. Mustafa Ali, when Mustafa Ali had that weird mask and he would come out with that was awesome. That was great. This angle with Seth Rollins, he seems a little bit more edgy, seems a little bit more, I guess, badassery he has with him. He just seems like he is... He seems like he's kind of at the end of his rope, and it's all or nothing for him. And I love that. And I feel like this segment for Mustafa Ali helped elevate his character and helped get him over more this week than it did the previous week with Bobby Lashley. I feel like this right here is right where Mustafa Ali needs to be, and I think this is absolutely fantastic for him. Does this feud with Seth Rollins, does this chase for the United States Championship, does this help reinvigorate Mustafa Ali, who has, for the most part, either not been on television, not been in catering, or just not used well, I would say, for probably the last 24 months. That's 2 years that he'll never get back. Does this help reinvigorate Mustafa Ali?
Absolutely. I thought that potentially this would be a guy that might be one of the characters that would benefit from leaving the company and getting some great storylines, getting some matches somewhere else, maybe AEW, maybe Japan, somewhere else, get your name over and come back a la Cody Rhodes with a lot better content. And I think, too, one of the reasons why WWE has been trending upward, why everyone has been thrilled with what's been going on, is the fact that different characters are getting different storylines that are somewhat interesting. And so for Mustafa Ali, you didn't want to be one of those guys that got lost in the shuffle, which can happen so easily. I mean, there were talks of potentially what's happened to Omos, what's happened to other characters, and now they're getting put in very interesting storylines. So I'm happy for Mustafa Ali. He deserves it, man. I mean, man, he was among some of the characters that were put in some of the stupidest angles I've ever seen. And you started to see, I think, something that he did that a lot of wrestlers start to do, which is maybe chirp a little bit online where you don't exactly come out and say, I'm pissed, but you can start to kind of hint that I'm being underutilized, I'm being underappreciated, or the tried and true, which I like, is the passive-aggressive retweet or comment on somebody that says, man, when are you going to be putting something interesting? And then you say something along the lines of trying my best, and then you get everyone's attention like, yeah, this guy's being underutilized. And then it gets its way up to the management. And I just think that, remember, Mustafa Ali can wrestle. He can be in the mix with Seth Rollins, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I think Mustafa Ali has a huge future, whether it's with WWE or whether it's with another company. You and I both agree Mustafa Ali could have really stand to benefit by leaving the company, by getting released. Triple H comes in. If Triple H sees what we see in him, honestly, the sky's the limit for this guy. He is absolutely fantastic and cut a great promo. His in-ring work is outstanding. He's got a good look. He can do a ton of things. I feel like when Vince was there, it was, hey, you're Arabic. You're going to be some type of Islamic terrorist character. This is what we're going to do. And if it's not that, we'll tone it down a little bit, and you will be basically a leader of a terrorizing group. It's like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. I think Mustafa Ali was not about that life, not about that action at all. Something that I didn't put on our rundown, but I do want to get your perspective on it. Baron Corbin made his re-debut, came out with JBL. This has been something that has been, they dropped a little nugget probably a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, and Baron Corbin hasn't really been seen. Gets reintroduced by JBL, who's now his mouthpiece, has some new gear-ish. What did you make of his re-debut, his repackaging? Because I'll be honest with you, I was a little underwhelmed. I like JBL as the mouthpiece, but the rest of it, it just looked like he got kind of a new outfit, and it's a lot of the same old same.
Yeah, no, the outfit sucked. I love JBL as the mouthpiece. It was perfect. The match was great. Obviously, a great a working partner with Dolph Ziggler. I thought that was great. But yeah, the ring attire reminded me of like 25 years ago. I mean, you got to update it. You got to do something with it. I mean, what's wrong with just pants and being shirtless? I mean, whatever the hell he was wearing was not complimentary. It didn't add anything. It didn't have sparkles, didn't have it grabbed your attention for how awful it was. But I look at it and I say, look, this is a great utilization of a Hall of Famer in JBL. Now I want to see this ascent of Baron Corbin with a mouthpiece, and I think it's great. But for me, it just sparked the idea of, man, this is starting to look like AEW. Lots of bringing back of characters, utilizing people as mouthpieces. I think Triple H was like, damn, if you know what, I kind of like it. Let's just do it. And I think that the combination of those two heels working together, great things are ahead, but you got to work on the presentation as well. But that's being nitpicky. Overall, I think moving forward, let's give Baron Corbin an opportunity with his push to see what he's got.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, but it just kind of felt like old paint over an old wall. It didn't do it for me. But something that got me really interested is what we got on SmackDown. And you touched on it in your opening monologue when you talked about Bray Wyatt. We got another weird Bray Wyatt promo that was quickly followed up by a vignette by the masked character. And I'll be honest with you, when the promo was done, I was kind of like, all right, I wonder what direction we're going in here. And that's basically the question that I have for you is what direction do we see for this character? And I was kind of scratching my head like, I don't know where we go with this. Like, I legit have no idea where we go with this. And then they gave us the vignette with the masked character. And I was like, oh, this makes it much more interesting. But I don't necessarily have a full understanding of what I'm watching and where we're going with it. And I'm okay with that. I'm kind of here for the ride. I want to know what you think the direction for this reincarnation of Bray Wyatt's character is, and how do you think they get it over? And do you have any idea who the masked character is? Or do you have any inklings on what the masked character might be?
I still think it's Bo Dallas, maybe in some reincarnation, but we'll see who potentially. They made it look like a little bit of an older character. So I'm fascinated. I thought it was a little confusing with how Bray Wyatt started out to be, which is probably the intended way in which they're presenting it, because you look at Bray Wyatt and it's an enigma. You started off with him kind of being a little bit more of the Wyndham Rotunda character, was like, hey, thank you guys. And I think this is what it's going to be. It's going to be a hectic, eclectic, bipolar type of a situation where Bray Wyatt is going to come out and cause damage, but what he's trying to shed, and from how I'm interpreting it, and maybe I have an expertise in certain areas of psychology, is what he's trying to portray is he was conflicted being one of these type of people that was ruthless, that wanted to do damage. And the Fiend character was the ultimate representation of destruction and damage and hurt and pain and psychological damage. And he took time away to kind of heal from that. And now he comes back as a person that's clean of conscience. And that's kind of the story I think they're trying to tell, is this is a conflicted character because he has a conscience and he doesn't want to be that kind of person, to be destructive and be violent. But at the end of that, I thought it was great. He says, I'm going to cause havoc and I'm not going to have any regrets. And I think that's great for him talking and kind of referencing, and the internet's great. He referenced all the spears that Roman Reigns gave him as the Fiend character. So it's going to be great to see. And I'm curious to see where the first victim will be. Who will be that target? Will it be Seth Rollins? Will it be right away the champion? Will it be somebody else? Will it be the acquisition of talent to support the cause that we're about to see? All in all, the thing that they did is they build intrigue. But the one thing, obviously, you have to complain a little bit is that they pumped in the music so loud that I had to kind of like put my ear up and be like, what the hell is he saying? You kind of, I like the musical beds, but you can't crank it up so loud that you can't hear the man. The man is the star, not the music.
Same thing with the masked character.
Get it together.
The masked character, there's like so much garbled noise in the background. It makes it really tough to hear him and understand. You got to turn the volume up really loud and listen very closely.
Absolutely. But all in all, one of the most interesting angles now heading into the end of 2022 into 2023.
Yeah, this is my perception on it. And again, I don't really know, but like the more and more I kind of go over it in my head and the more and more I talk about it out loud, I think you're going to get a character who is completely fractured. So we've already kind of had Bray Wyatt, and we already know he's got multiple personalities. Mm-hmm. I think what we're going to end up getting is you're now going to get a very humbled Bray Wyatt. You're going to get actually Bray Wyatt. You're going to get this almost scared, childlike persona. And that's the guy who talks to you, the guy who speaks to you and is very emotional and is very... He lets his guard down and lets you in. He's that guy. He's like, all these things happen, like almost like an abused child. Like all these things happen to me. And then on the other side, and I don't know, I know you probably have, if you've ever dealt with anybody who has a split personality, it's one of the scariest things in the world. If you've ever experienced it, it is absolutely terrifying when they flip. I think on the other side, the masked character is the guy who's actually pulling all the strings, is the guy who abused Bray Wyatt, and it's all internal, it's all mental. Inside of his own brain, he basically abuses himself, and that's that masked character. He's basically the guy who's in control. He's the guy who's always been in control. We just never knew it because you got these other versions of Bray Wyatt. I think that makes for, again, a lot of intrigue, makes for a very interesting story. Either way, this is wide open. They can do whatever they want with it. I don't really know where they're going with it, and I'm okay with that. I don't know who his first challenge is going to be. I don't know. I mean, we keep hearing about this Wyatt 6, and they keep talking about possibly bringing Bo Dallas back, which I like your idea of the mask character's Bo Dallas. And those who don't know, that's his real life brother. That's Wyndham Rotunda's real life brother. So I do like that as well. They talk about possibly making everybody who was in the Firefly Funhouse an actual character, similar to what we seen at Extreme Rules, where you had them in the stands, making them actual people and making them, again, like a cult underneath Bray Wyatt. Any way you cut this, man, there are so many different ways you can go. It is incredibly interesting, and I think it's absolutely awesome. You talked about MJF. Let's switch over to AEW. You talked about MJF. The MJF storyline and promo has honestly been one of the most interesting things AEW has going for it for the past, I would say, month, maybe 2 months. It's been absolutely great. Like, at least the stuff that's on screen. All the backstage stuff is fascinating and is absolutely great. And we're going to talk about some of the backstage stuff in the news and notes because we've had a release and we've got some insight as to what the company may want to do with one of the superstars. But it has been absolutely incredible. I've loved it. I thought it was awesome. Gets into the ring, cuts a promo on William Regal, talking about a time that they had met when he was brought in as basically local talent. William Regal and him have a conversation. William Regal says, hey, I'll stay in touch with you. In the end, after 3 months, William Regal blows him off. And this is something that has fueled MJF. And the crowd was so far behind MJF when he cut that promo that when William Regal started to speak, William Regal, who is the babyface in this, was getting booed. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. I think it's something we need to delve into a little bit. But William Regal starts to get booed. William Regal then tells him, if it was just an email that helped motivate you, you're lucky. I basically got my ass beat for 6 years, and that's how it was when I came up. So you're lucky it was just an email that helped motivate you. It wasn't other dudes punching you in the face that helped motivate you. By the end of it, William Regal was getting cheered. This was absolutely awesome. This promo was fantastic. You have two guys at the top of their game who the crowd believes in. And honestly, I don't think they knew who to cheer. I thought it was great. What did you make of this promo? You said you got some psychology on it. Give me some psychology on what you got from MJF. What took place with him and William Regal? Because I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
It was awesome. It was great because it was intense. It was real. And I think that anytime you could tell. But for me, though, it was interesting that they continue to have this fixation on WWE, calling out names and indicating
I know they need to let that go. It really takes away from whatever is going on.
Absolutely.
It was cool when you first started. It was cool when you were the new kid because it was like, all right, cool. We're not going to be bullied by WWE. Hey, WWE, F you. You don't need to do that. WWE is changed recently. Like, they used the word pro wrestler. Michael Cole used it on Friday Night SmackDown. He was like, in pro wrestling. And I was like, oh, that is great to hear. You don't need to call WWE out anymore. Just let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. It was real interesting to go that way, but man, you could tell that, you're starting to see what has motivated MJF and what's fueled his passion was that he was told that he was a 5 nothing and that he was somebody that wants to be a big deal, but was, really upset and hurt by some of the aspects of the business that are really real. And I think that the turn from William Regal was great too, because it's like, okay, let me test myself, but he delivered it in a great way, saying, what are you talking about? You've been somebody that's just been pushing and pushing. I had to do it in an era where it was totally different, and I was younger, and I was doing it longer, and I've had the ups and the downs, and it was great because it kind of represented two sides of the business, from the old school to the new school, and it was just done masterfully. It was one of those things where you weren't going to take your eyes and ears off of it. Delivered masterfully. It's probably one of the top 2 promos of the year, one of the great segments of the show. It delivered on all accounts. Intrigue, emotions, a little bit of insight, still kind of building that confusion with, should MJF be a face? Does he want to be a face? Inserting the character conflict into somebody that wants to be a heel, but is now also, going into this identity crisis of, okay, I've now been told that I take shortcuts. What does that actually mean? Fuck, double down. just be like, I don't give a shit if I take shortcuts, whatever means necessary. I think the introduction of a crisis is great, but MJF needs to double down. He needs to be a heel. This is how it works. And I think it's great because whatever he does next, it has to be this way, where whatever MJF does next to cheat, whether it be to cheat to get the title, or if he's faced with a crisis of conflict and he chooses to do the wrong thing, I think all it can do is take his heelness to higher levels. And that's what he's probably trying to do, is to say, how can I establish myself not only to be a top heel, but to be a transcendent, revolutionary heel that not only where you hate me, but you almost really wish that I was gone from the face of the earth. And anyway, I was also, obviously MJF is what he is. I was actually more intrigued by just how good William Regal was on the mic. You don't get to see it often. You get to hear it in commentary, him talking, but it's in short clips, and he's often interrupted by the 3 other dudes or the 4 other dudes or 9 other dudes that they have that are making up the broadcast team. For him to stand there and to deliver an impassioned plea without fucking up, it was awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. You did get to see basically a master at his craft, and the deck was so stacked against him. Like, the crowd was so white hot for MJF that, like I said, they were booing William Regal, and he flipped that entire crowd, which was fantastic to see. This is what I find so interesting about this MJF storyline, though. At this moment in time, because you're right, he is conflicted. He does seem like he's having this internal struggle. He doesn't know if he wants to be a heel or if he wants to be a face. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's great booking. The way that they've brought MJF back and what they've given him, again, similar to Bray Wyatt, basically the world is your oyster. Like the canvas is blank. Paint it how you want to paint it. Take us on the ride. Tell us the story. Because at this moment in time, I could see MJF going face. I could see MJF getting into a match with Jon Moxley. And Jon Moxley, part of the BCC, it is a constant fight. I could see Jon Moxley crossing a line, and that line turns him more heel. He's kind of this gray character. We would say he was a face, but I really do feel like he's a bit of a tweener. He just tends to lean a little bit more face than he does heel. MJF, obviously a heel, but he seems conflicted. You could have a double swerve in this match at Full Gear, and I think that would be really, really interesting. And to me, I think MJF as a face it just prints money. It is so different because the fans want to cheer him, right? The fans want to be on his side. The face should never be the heel should never be cheered. But I feel like the fans want to cheer him. He's great on social media as well. On social media, he is a straight heel. He is an absolute dick. If you follow him on Twitter, he is absolutely great. We're going to talk about what happened with Hangman Page. Hangman Page had a very unfortunate accident. He basically said, hey, hopes, prayers, wish nothing but the best for Hangman Page. Comes out later, Hangman Page was okay. And he was like, I feel like a total stooge. He's like, fuck Hangman Page. It was great. It was great. Like, him on Twitter, he is an absolute heel. It is fantastic. But you're right. He is conflicted. And I think that is a very interesting story. It's something that you can delve into. And again, you can go either way. You can go right, you can go left. But either way you're going to go, I think you do have the license to print money. Now, touched on a little bit there. Very scary scene to end Dynamite when Hangman Page was hit with a lariat from Jon Moxley and suffered a concussion. I would contest that Hangman Page was knocked out before he ever hit the mat. I watched it multiple times, back and forth. When it happened, I was like, oh, he didn't land real well, didn't look real good. He might actually be hurt. Next thing you know, the referees do the right thing. Check on him. Realize that he's injured. End up telling Jon Moxley, don't mess with him. He's not right. Calls in for the doctor. Doctor comes in. Basically, they call off the match. Hangman Page gets whipped into a corner. Jon Moxley's across the ring from him. They end up flying at each other, and they go to, it was supposed to be, I believe it was supposed to be a double clothesline, but Hangman took the brunt of it, and like I said, I believe he was knocked out before he ever hit the mat. Gets hit, does the flip, and lands on his head. And the moment he lands on his head, he's done. He's out. Suffered a really bad concussion. They end up taking him to a medical facility, and you've got 10 minutes left in the show. You could tell that this was not scripted. They were trying to fill. It's a tough spot to have 10 minutes. You've ever done anything on air, you know. When things don't go right and you've got to now fill, You're scrambling. You're kind of in this panic. It is basically you against the clock, and it's like you got to fill time. You got to fill airspace. What did you think? What did you think about one, the concussion that Hangman suffered, but two, the job that AEW did to kind of cover and fill? Because you got to remember, I shit on Tony Khan a lot. I do. I don't really like Tony Khan. I think Tony Khan's a bit of a fuckboy. This is his first time ever being put in a spot like this. This is his first time where your show is now coming up 10 minutes short, which is an eternity. And now you've got to somehow fix this, and you got to make this right. What did you think about how basically Dynamite went off the air? Very scary scene, and then the job that the team did to kind of get you to the 10 o'clock or get you to the 10 o'clock hour.
Yeah, my perception was they knew that potentially they weren't going to need to fill 10 minutes. Is once it happened, I feel like the MJF, the way it went down, because that was relatively smooth in regards to, MJF going down there and pretending like he was going to cash in. I didn't like it. I mean, first and foremost, because why can't they fix the microphones? Was that upsetting to you first and foremost?
So the microphones did bother me, but I don't think that was AEW. I think that was the facility, the arena, because there was like a clip that a fan took after Dynamite went off the air. Jon Moxley was laying into the arena and laying into whoever the sound guy was for the arena. He basically called him out and said, "Hey, how long you worked here?" He was like, "I've been here 6 years." He was like, "Do you think the microphones here suck?" And the guy was like, "They're not great." And he was like, "I think they need to fix this next time I come back here." Right? He was like, "I'll see what I can do." So I don't think it was on AEW. I think that was on the actual stadium itself.
Yeah. So,
but yes, I do agree with you. It did suck because it cut in and out, and it wasn't very good.
Yeah. So now I look at it, and now you want to get into it. The match was great. I thought it was intriguing. It was great. I think both had their stuff in, and I was going to be really excited to see how it played out, where the match was going to go. I probably truly believe that Jon Moxley was going to win the match, but here's the problem now that has been established. Jon Moxley has created a character that is now violent, and he is obviously, every time he goes out there, he wants to portray that I'm this tough MFer and that getting in this ring could potentially be harmful. But for me, the secret, and I think where WWE really tries to shine and maybe enhances things, is the idea is when you take out talent, and freak accidents happen. Look, Daniel Bryan Danielson has had numerous concussions in WWE. It happens. But when you take out talent and you're violent and you end up hurting somebody, you got to be ultra careful. That's the name. The art of professional wrestling is to portray that you're violent, to not actually be violent. And yes, I agree. Adam Hangman Page, I had the feel it was a concussion because you would tend to think that if it's a neck injury and he's not moving or things like that, you would expedite the situation. There was still assessment going on, and so you kind of had the feeling that the time that was being taken up evaluating him was just checking out his neurological functioning, his awareness, a couple questions, asking him where he's at, and he probably said, "I'm in China or in Japan," or bringing up old matches, and he's like, okay, he's knocked out. The blessing is that that the medical care was done top notch. That was awesome. The referee, give him credit for instantly stopping the match and no matter what, keeping the wrestler safe. Now, the other part I didn't like was you now have this happen. The match is done. Moxley takes the mic and is like, "Oh, this is dangerous." And the line that bothered me the most, everything I understand why he did it. He's portraying a character and he's trying to continue to get himself over. I didn't need the line where he says, "Getting in the ring with me could potentially be dangerous and you might not leave it." Look, it's just time and place, not the time for that message when the guy's laying there and now being taken out where you actually have to move the ropes to get the dude out. I don't think – listen, I think by now in 2022, after somebody has passed in the ring, after a WWE character has been paralyzed in the ring, we know it's dangerous. We know that. It's the part of the appeal of this sport is that at any moment a move can be dangerous. But the art of the business and why you continue to give credit to the likes of Bret Hart was Bret Hart could work physical. He could work stiff but at the end of the day, he treated his opponents like gold, and they never got hurt. So that's the art of professional wrestling is you have to protect the people in the ring. And if you're going to do a lariat and you're going to clock, and he clocked him. He literally clocked him on the side of the head. And whether he got it there or falling from his neck, wherever it was, you got the AEW roster has to take a serious step back and understand that we need to invest in working safer, smarter, and these violent matches have to be done in a way where still our investments in these characters can come through. And that's the part that bothered me the most is we all knew it's coming. Jim Cornette goes on his weekly 4-hour podcast and is like, someone's going to get seriously hurt. And two wrestlers have already had broken necks in AEW. Ricky Starks and another performer, trying to do a lariat, is 400 pounds, trying to flip and flips on his head. Come on. Let's be safe here and let's elevate the craft of professional wrestling. I know Moxley's serious. He bleeds every 2 weeks. So I don't need that. I don't need that further belief. I know he's a tough dude. Let's try and work toward being safer, and we hope that Hangman doesn't have any long-lasting, lingering impact of concussions, because it sucks, because when you hear the word concussion, they can return pretty quickly.
Yeah, they can or they can't. I mean, you have Adam Cole, who is still out from the concussion he sustained from Okada when they fought at Forbidden Door, which feels like an eternity ago. But look, I didn't necessarily have a problem with anything that happened. I don't think Jon Moxley is an unsafe worker. I think this was just a freak accident. These things happen. Wrestling is violent. Wrestling is chaotic. It is incredibly tough and hard on your body. And I didn't have a problem with anything that Moxley said when he said that you can enter this ring and sometimes you don't leave whatever walking out or getting out. Like, I didn't have a problem with that because, again, the show must go on, right? He still has a character that he has to get over and has to make believable with the fans. So him doing that, I didn't have a problem with it. I get what you're saying. Probably not the best taste to do that, especially when there's a dude laid out and they're putting him in a neck brace and they're carting him out on a stretcher. Probably not the best thing to do. At the same point, he knew what he had to do. He knew he had to help get MJF out there and help get that part of the show over so that they can get to the finish line. So I got it. I do think that AEW does have a bit of a problem with guys maybe going a little bit to the extreme with some of the stuff that they do. I think this is the one thing that WWE did really, really well. They basically put bumper rails on the matches. Like, you need to kind of stay within here. Don't go too far off. One, it's going to help protect you. Two, it's going to help protect whoever's competing with you. And I think that's why they help minimize as many injuries as they have. AEW, it's kind of like an indie promotion when it comes to putting the storytelling, putting the in-ring work together. It's like, hey, what do you want to do? Well, this is what I want to do. Okay, cool. You do that, and then I'm going to do this. Then we'll go get a table, and we'll grab 7 chairs, and we'll stack 7 chairs up on it. And it's almost like going back to ECW days when it was like anything for a pop. You don't need to do that. You need to be better about storytelling. You need to be better about the psychology of the in-ring work, and you need to be better about getting that stuff over. I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of times when I'm watching AEW, I'm looking at my phone. And it's because the psychology for the in-ring work just isn't there. It's just big spot, big spot, big spot, 1, 2, 3. And I'm just like, all right, cool. And I'm like, what did I grab out of that? And that's why sometimes when we go to talk about AEW, we've got like 4 things to talk about. And we had 3 hours of wrestling. That's not a whole lot from 3 hours of wrestling. It's just not things that are there. But I think you make some really good points with what you have to say on this situation. Either way, scary. Hangman Page ends up tweeting out that he is doing okay, so thankfully Hangman's going to be all right. Don't know when he'll be back in the ring. Fingers crossed it's very, very soon, but he is doing okay. Freak accident, bad things happen to good people. This is one of those things. I do want to close out our AEW segment with this, something that happened on Rampage. Usually we don't ever take a whole lot out of Rampage, but Willow Nightingale signed with AEW. Willow Nightingale, for those who don't know, is a female wrestler, bigger girl, very charismatic. The crowd is super, super, super into her. They absolutely love her. Absolutely love her. Can Willow Nightingale come in and help this women's division out? I think she has very good in-ring work. I think the fact that she's a face that the crowd is organically behind says a ton. I think if Tony Khan is smart, he books her right. He has a future star who can go up with the likes of a Britt Baker. Look, Britt Baker is the biggest women's star in AEW, is the epitome of what you need when you have a female wrestler, somebody who can do good stuff in the ring, somebody who can cut a promo, someone who's got the look. I think Willow Nightingale has a good look. I think she's good in the ring. I think she can cut a good promo if you give her time. I think they can make a star here with Willow Nightingale. Does Willow Nightingale come into AEW and help the women's division? More importantly, is she booked right?
I thought it was great. It kind of had the feel of a wholesome moment. It feels like kind of a culmination of everything she's been through. I think she's booked right. I think that the opportunity now to present herself will be really great moving forward. I think that the crowd really liked it. But I'm not exactly sure, where it's going to go. I'm curious, obviously, to see kind of where this goes. She started making AEW appearances back in, I think, April of last year. They started to pick up, and then I think with the the Owen Hart Women's Foundation tournament, and she had opportunities to face Jade Cargill was my first introduction to her. Is she going to be a superstar? That's yet to be determined, but I think it's great to see an opportunity, and it kind of has a feel that with what I like about AEW is they give opportunities, and if people take advantage, if people do the right things, then an opportunity is presented. And I think for her to have her name in the backdrop there was really special, and you could sense the real emotion when she hugged Tony Schiavone, that she really appreciated what was about to happen, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I think this is somebody booked properly. You have somebody who you can kind of build your women's foundation around. What was your show of the week here?
Man, it was tough because I liked SmackDown.
Good week of
really liked, obviously, Sheamus and the way in which it went down. Real quickly on SmackDown, I loved the way in which they used the Usos to try and say, hey, back off of Logan Paul. Don't do it. We just had a great match with Solo Sikoa, taking care of business. We put out Sheamus. Let's move on. And you got Jey Uso being a hothead, and he's like, what do you think I'm going to do? And then you got, I thought it was funny, Sami Zayn trying to be the peacemaker and trying to be like, no, the tribal chief said we can't do this. And then in the end, he gets out there, he tells Jey, hey, knock it off, don't do this. You've already got your stuff in on Logan Paul. And Jey doesn't listen. He goes back, and then, boom, Logan Paul drops him. I thought it was great storytelling. So for me, I did enjoy Raw, but I thought SmackDown was the best show of the week.
Me too. I agree. SmackDown, if you've got 2 hours, taking SmackDown, it was absolutely fantastic from, I want to say from start to finish. Again, another really, really good show. You want some news and notes?
Hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. Get into it. What made your list?
So lots of changes coming to WWE's pay-per-view schedule, possibly. Something that we do know that's going to take place. WWE's Day 1 may be a one-and-done thing. Last week, we talked about the possibility of Cody Rhodes returning if he was medically fit to Day 1. Well, Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics reported WWE has canceled the January 1st Premium Live event originally slated for Atlanta's State Farm Arena and does not plan to reschedule it at this time. There will be no pay-per-views or paid live events, whatever you want to call it, for 2 months between November 26th's Survivor Series and January 28th's Royal Rumble. Dave Meltzer of Wrestling Observer reported conflicts with football games in Atlanta played a factor in WWE canceling the event. The Atlanta Falcons are set to host the Arizona Cardinals on New Year's Day, and the Sugar Bowl is set for a day earlier. Now, WWE did not announce Day 1 would be coming to Atlanta until late July, months after the NFL set its schedule, and the Sugar Bowl announced its move to December 31st, which is interesting since it was conflicting from the start. Thurston did report WWE's relationship with NBC Universal may have played a part in Day 1 not moving forward. No further details were given on why NBC Universal may not want a paid live event on New Year's Day. Now, sticking with WWE's pay-per-views, there have been multiple reports that WWE does want to change the pay-per-view lineup and get away from having gimmick pay-per-views like Hell in the Cell or Elimination Chamber. Rather, the reports state that WWE wants to use those types of matches to enhance pay-per-views and not build a pay-per-view around a gimmick match, which I think we would all absolutely love. Now, a lot of news this week about the brawl out at Fallout. Our first little bit of action and fallout from the Fallout pay-per-view with AEW. AEW's trainer Ace Steel has been released from the following brawl after the all-out media scrum that saw suspensions of a number of wrestlers while the company investigated the incident. The incident took place on September 4th and saw CM Punk verbally attack several members of the AEW locker room, which turned into a physical altercation with some as Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks addressed CM Punk in the locker room. Here is where Ace Steel allegedly, among other things, bit Kenny Omega as he was trying to remove a dog from the fray. Now, sticking with more fallout from Brawl Out at AEW, it's being reported that Tony Khan and AEW are in negotiations with CM Punk to buy out the remainder of his contract. The sticking point is the non-compete, as WWE is the only company that could pay him what he would want. It really does sound like CM Punk is done with AEW at this time. Now, Fightful Select provided an update on WWE's backstage reaction to this new news report, noting that their sources provided some insight. Although they didn't think Vince McMahon would bring in CM Punk following the brawl out, the Triple H regime line of thinking may be that it's the right situation. Right money, right creative, can leave the door open for anything with reason. The report also noted that Fox pushed for Punk's return to happen before he eventually signed with AEW last year. If you guys remember, CM Punk's big issue was with Triple H, had a lot of issues with Triple H. So I don't know if that ever happens. We will have to wait and see. But it does sound like WWE could be interested. Now, we have more contract news coming out of AEW. Former AEW World Champ and current Ring of Honor champ Chris Jericho has signed a new 3-year deal with the company. In addition to his in-ring work, Jericho will take on an increased responsibility behind the scenes in AEW, where he will now serve as a producer and creative advisor while he continues to work as a mentor to younger talent. Jericho's contract is an exclusive AEW contract, similar to Jon Moxley's, where Jericho can work for AEW companies and the affiliates like New Japan. Also, how about some trivia for you? Did you know what impressive wrestling record Chris Jericho and CM Punk both hold? Bet you don't. They are the only two wrestlers in history to win the Ring of Honor World Championship, the WWE Championship, the World Heavyweight Championship, and the AEW World Championship. So that's a massive, massive record to hold. And again, only two guys in the world of the wrestling history have had that. Now, this WWE Hall of Famer wants one more match. Speaking on the Battlegrounds podcast, WWE legend DDP isn't against the idea of hitting his famous diamond cutter in a match, saying, I really want to do them when I'm 70, just be able to prove what I can still do. Now, DDP has only been in 3 matches since 2015, and currently he's only 66 years old. So we've got some time before he's 70. But could you imagine DDP wrestling at 70? I cannot. And finally, this WWE star is working through a legit injury. On an appearance on the Eckler's Edge podcast, it's a fantasy podcast. I believe it's done with Austin Eckler, who's a football player. Noted fantasy football fan Mike "The Miz" Mizanin revealed that he is currently working through an injury. The Miz said, I have a bursa sac that I burst that just keeps blowing up. It'll go away, then come back. I've messed up my shoulder a little bit. You try to work out and work through it and maintain your body. The Miz is currently in a feud with Dexter Lumis, and it seems it should be concluding soon. If you've ever had a bursa sac injury, it sucks. Thing ends up growing. It looks like a baby mountain on top of your shoulder. They usually have to go in, cut a bunch of it out, clean it up, and then you got to rest. It's the only way they ever get better. And you usually end up having more damage done to your shoulder once that thing goes, because that's part of the fluid that keeps your shoulder loose and moistened up. So it's the oil in the joint. But that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and rumors and notes and all the good things that we like to speculate on.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Anywhere that you see podcast content anywhere that they're housed. Type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you as we break down the world of Detroit sports and professional wrestling. And shout out to friend of the podcast, Ben Raven. He posted on Friday evening. He talked a little bit about it this week with the Lions, that he's going to be doing some commentary in an independent wrestling show. So go check out Ben Raven. He's been a friend of the podcast, loves himself some wrestling. He's going to dip his toes into potentially some announcing duties. And you never know with these shows what Ben might do. Might have some inside knowledge regarding what might happen at the show. Check it out. Ben's a good dude, loves himself some wrestling, and he's doing some great things as well. Again, hit us up if you've agreed or disagreed with anything that you heard on this week's broadcast. If our takes are completely off the mark, hit us up at Detroit Podcast. I love the content. I love those that listen to other shows and say, I can get a sense that you guys love wrestling because you keep using metaphors in all your other shows. Absolutely, we love wrestling because it is a fun and interesting and psychologically intriguing, entertaining aspect of life that we enjoy, and that's why we spend an hour or so every week taking down the information and trying to give our spin on the crazy world that is professional wrestling. Because I can't wait for next week. I loved watching the shows this week. The shows are picking up. Bro, even NXT was pretty good this week. Real quick nugget there. Counter programming, Shinsuke on there, Kevin Owens on there. It was interesting, but they got to stop with the corny yellow and bright color combinations. You got to stop. You got to bring back, do it, Triple H. Bring back the ruggedness of NXT. The bright lights, the neon way it's done is really, really tough. But all I can do is give you a quick review of what Andrea said. She's like, what is this? And she's like, yeah, it kind of looks like a third or fourth brand. You got to bring it up to speed, Triple H, Shawn Michaels. Come on. You don't want to have a developmental show look like you're doing it like an independent show. I know it is, but you want to bring it up to speed in the modern era of 2022. And that's my final take on this week's episode of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.